Looking good. Hi, everybody. My name is Tristan. I've been at Chenars for about 4 years now. I work mainly in the greenhouse with perennials in the natives section. Um, oh, hey, welcome in. And I went to college at OSU. I studied natural resource management and with a focus in ecological restoration. I actually graduated summer 2024, so that's exciting. And yeah, it's a pleasure to teach this class this year. Darren usually does it, but figured he'd let me take my hand at it. And yeah, I'm from Bend, Oregon. I've been in Oregon my entire life. And I moved down here about 5 years ago. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today with you all. Right. Everybody can hear me in Zoom. That's good. All right, let's get started. Okay, so today the focus of our discussion will be regarding motivations for planting native plants and also just going in depth with specific species, where to plant them, how to integrate them in your home garden, and the various benefits associated with that. So here I have our class itinerary. We're going to do a little quick regional overview of the Willamette Valley, and then we're going to quickly define what a native is, and kind of what goes into that. The individual species descriptions will take up the majority of our class. We're going in through just individual species and kind of commenting on their specific characteristics. And then I'll just talk about specific things with incorporating them into your garden.
No, wait, I thought it said 10:30.
It's 10:30. No, you're good. I just started. It's 10:32. So.
Oh.
No worries. Good to see you. Take a seat anywhere. Yeah. All right. Oh, there's my little animation. I worked really hard on. Thank you. Yeah. So yes, we're in the Willamette Valley. We're known for our rich soil, our mild climate, and the diverse ecosystems that occur throughout. I think it's about 100 miles long and about 40 miles wide, the entire valley. And our region is unique for many reasons, but one major aspect, hey, welcome in, is being the prevalence of oak savanna ecosystems throughout this area, as a result of indigenous burning, planting, and cultivation of the landscape. It's a really interesting ecosystem type because oak savanna is kind of an example of humans as being a keystone species, where that just basically means that we impacted the ecosystem so much that with the removal of active management, hey, welcome in.
Thank you.
These ecosystems started to dwindle and go away. With the rise of agricultural development, westward expansion from the east by colonial Europeans, and over 90% of oak savanna have been lost, sadly. But with efforts of activism and environmentalists through state and federal legislation, a lot of restoration projects have been underway in recent decades. Okay, and then yeah, I just wanted to put this slide in here to just give you guys just examples of different things going around our community regarding different restoration projects and different natural areas. I'm sure a lot of you know all of these. I actually worked on a Denali Creek restoration. We did a planting out there. It was awesome. There was like 100 plants that we did. So, and then OSU Extension was obviously a really good resource as well.
Was that with the water action team?
Yes, it was the I think it's the Sustainability Coalition. Yeah, that was really fun. All right. Okay, so yeah, we're getting into what classifies a plant as native. So they're quite interesting in that there's different scales that you can look at for grouping a plant as a native. So for instance, the Willamette Valley is more of a local range. It's a smaller area. There's more focus on specific species. When you get to talking about the west of the Cascades versus the east of the Cascades, that's more of a distinct regional difference. Like obviously plants that grow on the east side are not going to do very well necessarily on the west side. So you have to kind of group natives into that, taking into account the climate, different abiotic factors. And then like a continental one would be obviously like North American natives. Although you really don't, we don't like really going into that scale because obviously there are microclimates, there's different ecoregions, and one native in Montana isn't necessarily going to be good here for our local fauna and wildlife. Um, so also, yeah, let's see, so plants introduced by humans are considered non-native. Now, if you go back to what I was talking about with indigenous populations, like they did cultivate natives around here. But so basically, when I'm talking about natives, we're going back to when this area was colonized, basically. That's our baseline. Um, Many native plants have been selected, bred, and cloned to produce certain traits, such as the red flowering currant. It's the King Edward variety. Um, these ones, so some people don't necessarily like to plant cloned and bred natives because that can kind of bottleneck populations sometimes. But that's only when you're doing a large scale restoration project. If you're just doing home gardening, using clones or something with the same genetics is not necessarily going to impact the population negatively. But if you were to do like a large scale restoration project, you'd want to do seed rather than like a start or a clone because it could definitely be an issue if there's a disease or any kind of disturbance. It could wipe out a population. So, but for us, we can get clones and everything, and it should be okay. Yeah, so some nativars are hybrid. So native is just a cultivar, and they added native on the end of it. For larger scale plantings, yeah, it's best beneficial. Yeah, okay, that's good. Any questions so far, by the way? Good.
Native.
Yeah, there is. I think it's Prunus malacoides or something like that. I don't have it in the slide, but yes, there are native, like crab apples and stuff. All right. So I think we all have different motivations for wanting to cultivate native plants, and I just listed a few on here. They help preserve local biodiversity. Let's see. Additionally, they don't need to be irrigated most of the time. So once they're established, they can be in sites on your property that you don't want to manage actively. They'll establish with just a few waterings once you plant them. You can also seed them and they'll take really well. They're also just really beautiful. It's nice to have access to our forest and be educated about what's in our community and just get connected to our environment. And also a community is built out of, dealing with natives like us. We're connecting through this topic. It's fun and it's cool to meet different people. All right. So then we get into the suitability for our actual home garden. Now, not all natives are going to be suitable, and I'm not going to talk about a vast majority of natives because there's too many, and also a lot of them are not actively in commercial sale. A lot of the ones that we have here are going to be ones that are going to be low maintenance, not going to have to be irrigated, and ones that can be in containers because some natives like actually just don't take well to being transplanted. So a lot of them will have to be started from seed. But yeah, and then suitability. We also look at stock availability, and we just want to make sure they're tolerable of some irrigation because a lot of houses will have irrigation out in their yards and stuff. But yeah, like oaks, white oaks don't necessarily want to be in a wet spot. So if you have a heavily irrigated spot, it won't do well there. But yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna get into just talking about individual species. And I'm just doing trees, shrubs, and then perennials and bulbs and all that. So we're just gonna organize it that way. So obviously we have the Oregon white oak, Quercus garryana. These guys can get very tall, but they're best for a site on your property where you're not gonna want, too much maintenance, full sun, and then, they can get really tall. So you have to keep that in mind. But a lot of them can be in stands, so you can plant them in a row or in a little grove. They're often really shrubby when they're young, less than 25 years. So it takes a while for them to get pretty big. As you know, they have those galls from wasps that nest in their leaves. And yeah, they have a nice golden fall color. You know, if you have a spot on your property that is pretty dry, gets really good drainage, you know, not huge water retention, they'll do well on that. So disturbed areas are good for them. They can be under the canopy, but they'll just be stunted and not grow as tall. But yeah, and they also provide food for many small vertebrates and birds around here and squirrels and all that, just different fauna. But yeah, so as you can see, like they have the different scales from the acorn, and their bark, they get these deep furrows as they grow. That's a telltale sign of a white oak. This is the only other tree I have on the talk. This is a very common one we see in nurseries. This is the vine maple, Acer circinatum. So this one you can actually plant quite literally, a lot of natives you can plant anywhere in your yard. This one is one of them. These ones, they'll grow differently based on how much light they're receiving. So if they're under a shaded area, they're going to be viney, snaky. They're not going to be super dense. But they still will do fine. They'll just reach for any column of light that they can and look quite snaky. And then, but if you plant them in full sun, they'll get more dense, withdrawn into themselves a little bit. They'll have better fall color because the chlorophyll will be emptying out in the fall. If they're in the shade, they need as much light as possible so they won't really turn that bright yellow and red color that you typically see. These can get 10 to 20 feet tall-ish. And yeah, that's about it on those guys. I'm sure we've seen many of them. And we also have different cultivars. So this one I have here on the slide is a Pacific Fire. Those ones are gorgeous once their leaves go away. Very, very pretty corally color on there. Yeah, they're fun. And they yeah.
The newer growth has the darkest red color.
It is.
As the wood gets older,
it starts to fade away. I think it definitely gets sun bleached and stuff over time, so it just definitely fades. But yeah, and then Mahonia, as I'm sure a lot of you've seen around here, we sell it quite often. It is a very versatile shrub. These guys are used in a lot of disturbed sites. You see them in what are they called, hell strips? You know, in parking areas and all that, which is really good to see. I'm glad that a lot of our city planners are doing natives. And it's super good because they can handle these really disturbed soils and drought. They're really drought tolerant. The one thing is though, they don't necessarily want to be in full sun. So they're good like dry shade plants. So under a canopy, under a tree, beautiful flowers. The pollinators love them. Very delicious. And yeah. And oh yeah, so there's also, it's not just Mahonia aquifolium, there's multiple varieties. The other native ones, Mahonia repens and Mahonia nervosa. Repens is like a low growing ground cover. Aquifolium is technically like it spreads, but the repens is way more low. It's like, I think about a foot tall at max, and it's a shade plant, and those ones can handle a little bit more moisture. Yeah.
I see the grapes on there. Does it self-seed and spread like?
So they do self-seed, but I believe that they send out little suckers a little bit. That's how they typically will spread from one spot. But yes, they do go to seed for sure. And a lot of our fauna around here will eat the berries. And they are edible. They're just not very good for us. They don't taste very good. And yeah, the main real beneficial aspect of them for our ecosystems is the blooms, because they're just numerous.
They are planted in the sun.
Yeah, good question. If they're planted in full sun, they just might burn the leaves and they might not grow as well as shade. Yeah, it'll be slower, stunted, a little bit scraggly, but yeah, because there are some in full sun for sure. Yeah, but it just depends. But they are typically like an understory plant.
And I've had one that got too much sun because of the location.
Mhm.
They planted it and it didn't flower.
Okay, yeah,
So-
yeah,
And then I've moved it and so it's much happier.
good. Okay, that's good.
So they are pretty sensitive.
How big was it?
To
Did you
the
have
hot
to?
sun that, well, I
Oh, okay,
was,
yeah,
I bought it here.
nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, any questions on the different? Oh, nervosa. That one is a very aggressive spreader. So if you want to cover a disturbed area, definitely do that one. You can control it. When I say aggressive spreader, it's not like it's gonna take over necessarily, but it's much more fast growing than the other varieties. It has a duller color. It's not as like glossy as those leaves, but same flowers, same gist, but not as tall. And yeah, it's a good one. We do get that one sometimes as well, but not as common as repins or aquifolium. Nope, is it doing it? Awesome. So we have our native roses. I'm sure you guys see these all the time walking around town. This is the Nootka rose, Rosa nookana. So these guys are tolerable of a wide variety of different soil types around here because they are adapted to our ecosystem. So dry, wetland, not wetland, but moist-ish. So they can be on the flank of a wetland or a lowland site, and they'll do fine. And yeah, these guys are gorgeous. There's multiple different native varieties. There's Pisocarpa, Gymnocarpa, and then Woodsy Eye. Woodsy Eye is on the East Cascade, so that one we don't get very often here. They need that drier climate. Hello. Oh, it's all right. Welcome in. Yeah, so Pisocarpa is more of a swampy rose. It's going to be in your wet, inundated sites that, a lowland area, stream banks are where they usually grow. And they can get pretty tall, so 7 feet or more. So this is the Pisocarpa is the taller variety. So if you want like a privacy screen or something like that in an area of your yard that stays pretty wet, that's a good one to do. And they're really easy to control as well. You just cut them back if they're getting too crazy in your yard, and they're really good. And the rose hips are a valuable resource for many different fauna around here. And you can also make stuff with rose hips. You can do a bunch. And then the Gymnocarpa has smaller rose hips on them, but basically the same color flower. They're all pink. Some are more faded than others, but yeah, they're an awesome addition to a native yard. Okay, and then we have the Pacific 9-bark. They have these white inflorescences. Their bud is like pink until it blooms. And they have a nice fall color. These ones are a stream bank plant. So they're going to be wanting wet, moist conditions. Once they're established though, they don't necessarily need summer irrigation if it's in our clay soils that harbor water for like all summer in the depths down there. They should be able to adapt quite well. They flower April to May, and pollinators like bees and butterflies particularly love them. And they also form a dense thicket, so it's a habitat for many different birds and different rodents that are native here. And yeah, and their seed capsules are definitely predated on quite a lot. And then we have the lovely Polydiscus discolor or ocean spray. Now these ones are gonna be your park shade areas, like on a flank of a woodland is typically where they grow, but they are in the understory. They just get quite stunted and leggy when they're under there. They can get quite big, as you see in that photo down there. Their panicles and flowers are huge, and they look like little feather dusters. And they bloom quite early in the summer, which is nice. Many of the natives, if you have a native garden, they'll be blooming successively throughout the season. So it's kind of nice that there's, constant blooming happen if you have a native garden. And then the one caveat to these is that their blooms will stay on and they turn brown. So that could be a cosmetic thing that some people might not like about them. But other than that, really easy to take care of, and not really that involved.
Is there much pollen in those?
There is a bit, yeah, there's quite a bit from those flowers for sure. So if you're allergic or sensitive, it could be not very nice. Okay. So next we have Salal, Baltheria shalon. So these guys are going to be another shade plant, but they can also handle sun as well. They surprisingly can get pretty tall, as you see by that bench picture over there. I think that was taken in Fort Palace, if I'm not mistaken. That would have to be, pretty moist, covered in part shade for them to get that tall. And a lot of people will cut them back and create kind of like mats. So most people don't have it being a giant shrub like that. They'll keep it low growing underneath their trees or what have you. You find them all over our native forests around here, creating nice thickets. And they have these urn flowers right there, and they have their berries, which are edible, but a lot of our fruits are not great. But yeah, it's very good for local wildlife and birds and stuff. But yeah, once it's established, no irrigation, and they're evergreen, which is very nice. A lot of things on here are not. A lot of our natives aren't necessarily, so it's good to see one. Mahonia is evergreen as well. This is a very pretty one. It's now Morella, California. Fornica. It used to be Mirica. They changed the classification. These ones are specifically found along our coastline. And actually in our county, they go inward from that's their range. They go into Benton County and I think Lynn as well. But they're adaptable throughout Oregon for sure on the West Cascades. They need a pretty good amount of sun. So when I say sun or part shade, so sun would be 6+ hours of direct sun. And then like part shade is between 4 to 6 and so on from there. Yeah.
Sun, so there's the morning sun and there's the afternoon.
Yes.
I know that the afternoons, the plants on that side, the afternoons on, they either love it or they don't.
Yeah, so afternoon sun is the most intense.
Yeah.
So if your spot is getting that, high noon sun, you're gonna want something that is highly adapted to full sun. These ones, yes, you could. Yeah, you just want to make sure that it is relatively moist. So plant it in like a clayey soil like we have around here, and it should be good once it's established. But yeah, these guys get quite tall as well, as you can see on there, 10 to 12 feet. And they have lovely flowers that are like a deep red, so they're pretty cool for that. And then their seed pods are used by I don't know the exact species, but different birds and stuff. And they're evergreen. And when they sway in the wind, it's definitely they flow with it. They're very pretty. So if you want like a privacy screen or anything, very good. And they also have nitrogen fixing bacteria nodules. I don't know if you guys know how beans have that as well. So it can be good if you want to plant something underneath it. It'll keep nitrogen in that patch of the soil, which is highly useful.
One question.
Yeah.
Deer eat when they're young.
Yeah, so deer will browse them. So
Trying to establish that.
yes, so that can be tricky. I was telling them earlier, there's a few different methods for deterring deer. There's physical barrier. There is like blood meal. That is one that is pretty useful. But yeah, so typically you want to get one that is quite established if you have bad deer problems. So I think like a 2-gallon pot would be good. We have varying sizes typically.
The blood meal is spread on the ground.
So you actually do like a ring around it, like an actual barrier, and that usually does pretty well. It will wear off though, like especially if it's raining, it'll leach away into the soil. I've done it for like wildflowers and stuff like that, and it works pretty well. But yeah.
We have a commercial hazelnut orchard and we tried everything, and the only thing that works for us is
Yeah.
a product called Plant Skid, which is a
Yes.
dehydrated blood.
Mhm.
And you mix it up and put it in a tank, and it's gross.
It is
but
gross.
You're basically
Yeah.
spreading blood all over your plant.
Yeah, I know you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You spread it as the powder, or do you spread it as?
It's
That's the
rehydrated back into a liquid, so
Mhm.
you can basic, and so if you're like driving around on a 4-wheeler in the wind, you come back just covered in.
Oh yeah. It's true. It's great. We do sell that here.
But nothing else works as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to help like immensely. Plant
It's a
Skid.
Swedish name, SKYDD or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And we have it if you guys after this want to check it out. It's back there.
People out there they're not here.
Yes, I know. Oh, man. Okay. Ribes sanguineum, red flowering currants. I touched on this briefly. So these guys are going to be really well adapted to a lot of different sites. And this one is world renowned, so it's been bred and shipped off to many different locations around the world. That is also why there's like specific cultivars for it. There's just been funding to do that different breeding. You know, they can be a hedge like down there, or they can be more shrubby. It depends on their pruning, light availability, just their site in general. But they can handle really unconventional soil, stuff that is not very moisture retentive and stuff. So like I was saying, in those parking lots, a lot they are used in those quite often. They want full sun but can tolerate shade. They bloom early spring, so I think it's roughly April when they will start, or March, late March. You know, pollinators are loving them. They have a huge amount of blooms on them. I think that's part of their commercial success, is just their beautiful blooms, like a mauve pink. They can even be like a light pink too sometimes. So, and then King Edward is a specific cultivar or nativar, and that one has been cloned and distributed for its more compact growth. So it's not going to get super leggy or big. It's dense. It has a more rounded form. And yeah, it's good for hedges. So I think this one down here is a King Edward. So you know, that's their fall color up there. I wanted to show you guys. And their leaves will usually fully fall off around like November-ish. So yeah, I do love their leaves though. They're very small and cute. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yes.
Yes.
So in a controlled environment like the garden,
Mhm.
is there any feeding or amendment to do to the soil to replicate what would happen?
Yeah, good question. So typically with a lot of natives, you're not going to want to put them in like a raised bed or something that's been amended with a whole lot of different soils like that we have here, because they are so adapted to our soils. It's kind of like silly kind of to plant them in those. Obviously you want to till up the soil, add some nutrients, like a compost would be good in certain instances, but a lot of the time they are pretty well adapted to our area. And that is a big thing about natives, is kind of knowing where they grow within the forest and kind of mimicking that within your yard. It's definitely important for certain ones. Some are more generalist, but bulbs specifically, you kind of want to make sure you have the right site in your yard for where they actually grow typically. I'll talk about that more like when we get into camas and stuff. But yeah, typically don't need a feed. Yes, Lauren, I will send this out after. It'll be on YouTube. Yeah.
So, I buy one of the plants here, and I bought a red flowering permit,
Mhm.
and then it grew well, but the flowers were white. And I asked Darren, who was the manager here,
Mhm.
and he said, that happens, you have to see, when you buy it, you have to see it flowering and see if it's a red one
Mhm.
before buying. This is some kind of generic name.
Yeah.
So I moved anyway, and I left it, and I bought a new one, and it's already just made a little flower as of like yesterday. And it's that color.
It is?
It's
Okay,
just
good.
really
I'm glad
cool.
you called. Yeah.
Surprised.
Yeah. Some of them are distributed by seed, but many of them are cloned. And that's how typically they start with cloning. Like they'll go out into the forest, see which native is a good growth form, and then they'll clone that from there and kind of sell it. And it is useful, like doing those cloning, because propagating is important for getting a stock of native plants. And, you know, it's good to have as much to put out into our ecosystems. Okay. Spirea. This is one of my favorites, Spirea douglasii, or the rose spirea. Now, these guys you see, Jackson Fraser is covered in them. They're a wetland plant, and they spread by rhizomal growth underneath. They can also go to seed, obviously, but they'll spread with little suckers. And they're going to want full sun, so wet conditions, full sun. So but obviously they can handle shade, but they are typically the only plant out in a landscape, so they're going to get sun all day. Now these blooms are gorgeous and they're very numerous. They'll bloom from May to August, you know. They do kind of like the ocean spray. They'll get those dry brown buds at the end, but I think they're kind of charming. But that can be an aesthetic factor to not necessarily want one. Yeah, 3 to 7 feet tall. And then we also have Spirea densiflora, which is also pink. It's a bit more stout. But yeah, so they grow. I have a note here for it. Okay, yeah, they're like 2 feet tall, and rather than the taller variety here. So these can be used as like a privacy screen, whereas the other ones can be more for smaller plantings in like by your house or something. And yeah, the densiflora is actually native to more alpine areas of Oregon, whereas this one is more lowland, wetland areas. And densiflora can also handle more drier conditions, so that's something to think about.
Handle sun.
Yes, they can. Yeah, they love it, so it's good for them. Yeah,
The
they don't.
densiflora.
Yep, densiflora as well. Almost all the Spirea definitely want pretty good sun, full sun to part sun.
Can you go over again with the,
Yeah.
what is sun, what is part sun? what is
Yes.
part shade?
Yes.
Part-
Yeah. I might mess it up in my head, but full sun is 6+ hours. Part sun is 4 to 6, and then part shade would be like 2 to 4, and then shade is 2 less. So shade is like barely any sun at all, like direct sun. I mind you is what I mean by that. Yeah, of course. And yeah, so that's it for Spirea. And we have, yeah, like I said, most all the things I'm talking about we have outside, and I also have a little wall of some things. I have a Spirea. They look great, don't they? They're just twigs right now.
Is that bottom picture,
Mhm.
bottom left,
Yeah.
is that I don't know how to say it. Is it Douglasii?
Oh yeah.
Or
Yep.
is
That's
that-
a Douglasii. The Douglas Spirea is another name for it, but that's them in fall, kind of. So that's their brown. Sorry, it's kind of hard to see, but that's their brown spent flower, and then that'll turn into seeds eventually. But yeah.
If it is in sun.
Mhm.
6 hours, it still needs to have a moisture soil.
That is a caveat here. They can handle drier conditions, especially if you water them like for a spring through summer. Their roots would be more established, they'll be deeper in the ground, and they can withstand that. So like you can plant it if you're not getting if it's not a lowland site, you can plant it on the edge of a forest canopy or anything, or a tree canopy, and that'll keep shade, so more water will stay down there. But yeah. Let's see. Oh, come on. Pacific leading cards, the Dicentra formosa. These ones are another shade, low growing, spreading perennial. They can handle some dry conditions, but they prefer moist and wet. They're deciduous, they have lovely, soft, like bouncy leaves. They're really cool. Max 2 feet usually. And they actually, the way they disperse in the wild is through ants taking their seeds into their nests, because they have a protein coating on the outside of their seed, and that they eat that and don't eat the seed, and it just stays in the ant nest and germinates from there, which is pretty cool. I think mice do it as well, but yeah, that's why Formosa, that's the name. I think it's based off formic acid, which ants produce.
I know those are
Yeah.
poisonous, right?
These guys, I don't actually know off the top of my head. They definitely, I think, are toxic, but
Yeah.
not super.
So do deer not like them then?
Deer typically don't really browse on the hearts. Yeah, but I hesitate to giving you like, no, they don't, because deer, you know how they are. But no, not typically, no. And yeah, here's their seed pod. That's that protein coating on the outside right there. And then I just thought this was cool. You can see it pushing through right there. Yeah. And then spring through summer,
But they
roughly.
definitely need
Yeah, something shady.
I've got shade, it's dry shade.
Well, so when I say that they need moist, it's more so like in the summer. So like if you could irrigate it maybe once a week, that'd be fine. They would be okay.
It looks like they make a nice ground cover.
They do, yeah, and they're lovely, but yeah, definitely need shade. They don't do well in the sun. They're definitely an understory plant. But yeah, that's Dicentra. We all know this one, I'm sure. This is Asclepias speciosa, or showy milkweed. These guys actually occur through a wide range, like California, inland a little bit, all the way up to Washington. These guys are very valuable for the monarch butterflies and other butterflies and caterpillars specifically. When they eat the leaves, the caterpillar is filled with a substance. I don't know what it is exactly at the moment, but it basically makes them taste gross and smell gross to predators. So it's very, very helpful for them. It's like a natural protectant against predation. And yeah, these guys, full sun, well-draining soil, dried and moist. They're pretty versatile in that regard, and they do have a nice smell. And yeah, our pollinators love them. They'll bloom late spring to midsummer, and they are just really gorgeous. I do love them. And there's another variety, Asclepias cordifolia. These ones have more of a heart-shaped leaf, more purplish flowers, but very similar to the one we have. And those are typically found in Southern Oregon and the dry spots down there. They're really drought tolerant. Both of these are. And we do carry this quite often.
It takes 2 years for the seeds to turn.
That is correct. It can take 2 years, because some of these natives really do take a minute to germinate. Some even need, have you heard of scarification on seeds? Some will need that. If you're going to start from seed, you'll need to kind of score the seed a little bit. So yeah, typically,
Faster to buy the same.
yes, yeah. But yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, that's about it. And it's really cool because they have this like glassy or glossy look on their leaves with their glaucus, which is the waxy coating on the leaf. But yeah. And okay, so now we're getting into Armeria. So this one you see widely on the coast. So these ones are if you live on the coast, they're very salt tolerant, high salinity soils, they'll do great. But they can also be up here in like a rock garden. They're very good for anything that doesn't really have very good soil. They can help stabilize slopes and everything. And they spread pretty dang good. And the pollinators love them. They are kind of slow growing, but they will eventually spread and mound, especially if they reseed. That can really accelerate that process. They prefer obviously a dry soil, and they bloom from May to August, so it's quite a long blooming period. Let's see here. Yeah, and then this just shows you the root system. These photos are from OSU. Yeah, that coastal one's pretty. I wish I knew exactly where that is, but yeah. Okay, so now we're getting to camas. There's quite a few different subspecies within camas, but so this is the great camas. There's camas comache and liclinii, which I'm going to talk about. Comache is a bit smaller and stout. It can handle drier sides and shadier sides, so they will do well underneath the canopy or in a north-facing area by your house. They do want pretty like soils that get pretty inundated in the winter and then dry out in the summer. They can handle that. It's really fine, but you'll see them in our wetlands. They go good. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, they're beautiful. I love the blue waves you see around town when they're blooming. And then liclinii is a larger variety, so they're a bit taller, about 2 feet, I want to say. And they occur in actually pretty waterlogged areas. So you'll see them in the middle of a wetland, like at the lowest point. And these guys, they're typically blue, but sometimes white. So that's pretty cool. The white ones are always fun to find.
Isn't there like one that looks just like it called the death camas or something?
Oh, yes. I don't know the Latin name on that one, but I can look that up really quick. But yes, there is that one, and that one is not, I think it's poisonous for sure.
These folks all.
So we do, yeah. Typically, I think they come in around September, October, so we'll get them as bulbs. And then we also have them now as bulbs in pots. So they're being started right now. But yeah, and they are just highly useful for many pollinators and animals because they provide habitat, they provide different pollinators, and actually indigenous people used to cook the bulb. It would take a very long time. They would put them underground with a fire and coals, and they would basically char them until they were edible because they are not edible unless they're cooked like that. So that's pretty fascinating. They're very, very important crop for the Kalapuya and other tribes around here. Right. Rhodea. This one's gorgeous. This one's good for dry sites, full sun, meadows, anything like that, kind of dry, crappy soil. These are also called harvest lilies. They are also edible and they were used a lot by different indigenous tribes. They have corms instead of bulbs. That's kind of a silly distinction, but it is different. The corms are the swollen stem rather than the bundled leaves that bulbs are. But yeah, they're edible, which is pretty neat, but they're so small, it's not really worth it to harvest them. But yeah, so they will spread pretty vigorously once they're established and create a beautiful carpet of purple down there. There's a few different varieties. I could put Rhodea elegans down there. The only real morphological difference between those two is you see like how there's the white petals in the middle there. Elegans has theirs extended outward. That's really the main difference. I think elegans is a bit taller as well, but yeah. So these are a good one for rock gardens and all that. They have sparse linear leaves and they typically will bloom, they'll lose their leaves and then bloom. So they'll just be like little sticks popping up and then they'll have the blooms on there. And then, yeah.
What time of year do they bloom?
So these ones are going to be a bit later in summer. So around, I think it's June to August typically, in the late summer. And then, yeah. Let's see. Oh, and they used to be coupled, Rhodea used to be coupled together with Tritolea and Dichelostoma, I believe is how you say that. They look quite similar, but they are now different and distinct different genuses. Ah, Trillium. So this one was thought to be our state flower by many people, but it's actually the Oregon grape. But this one is gorgeous. It's quintessential Pacific Northwest. These guys are early blooming. They're considered like heralds of spring. They're usually the first ones in the understory to be blooming. Shade, hard shade is ideal for them. And once they're established in an understory, they'll spread through their rhizomes and create like a patch, basically a patchwork, as you can see in there. I tried to get photos that would show them out in the wild because I feel like that's really useful. And yeah, their blooms are just very weird. Oh, and I think the common name is wake robin because the common one. Oh, it is. That's right.
What's the difference between overcome and?
Yeah, so ovation is typically a little bit, the flowers are a bit different. They turn purple and the leaves are a bit more brighter green. And then there's also chloropetalum. So those ones are more erect, they go a bit taller, and then they can range from red, green, and white flowers. They're quite interesting. But yeah, and chloropetalum is a bit larger than all these guys. But we do have Trillium out there. I think it's only albidum at the moment. But yeah, really, really nice, good native to have. Yeah, and then mice and ants also are mutualistic with these guys as well. Okay, so this one is they don't do checker blooms in container potting. They don't do very well with transplant. So these ones you would seed into your yard. And we are the capital for checker mellow. It's pretty cool. And there's like, I think upwards of 20 different species around our Willamette Valley and in Oregon. And so the main one that I'm going to be talking about is Cusickii. These ones they have deep pink flowers. They kind of remind me of hollyhock, kind of. And they often have multiple branches coming off of stems. And they typically occur in the South Willamette Valley. And but a lot of these have different ranges, so it can be pretty important to kind of figure out which uh, checker mellow or checker bloom is native to your specific region. Like kind of going back to what I was talking about with local native ranges. These ones, since they are so diverse in such a small geographic area, we definitely want to make sure that more threatened species of them aren't being outcompeted by ones that are more generalist. Like there's Nelson's checker bloom down there. These ones are threatened. They're listed as threatened right now, and they occur in our direct area quite often. Now, obviously, they're dwindling a little bit due to different habitat encroachment factors and stuff like that. But yeah, so those ones are more of the rose pink. They're all pretty much pink and white. But yeah, so there's Brigada, which is a deep rose. And all of them will prefer dry soils. They usually like full sun to shade. And yeah, these guys are beautiful and pollinators love them. And yeah, their seed pods will just start drooping off of there. They'll reseed themselves and spread, which is really useful. But yeah. Nice. They also kind of remind me of foxglove too. Okay, so this is the last slide of individual plants. So these are our ferns. So we have quite a few native ferns. I couldn't, talk about all of them, but as we know, they'll shade moist environments. Deer fern is an evergreen one, so that's, I guess I've zoomed. It's this one right here. And we have them here. They're quite like a waxy feel to their leaves. You can tell they're evergreen with how thick they are. And they get pretty big once they're established, about 2 feet wide, and then just bigger as time goes on. Polystichum unitum is up here, a western sword fern. Classic PNW plant, great for understory if you have a little grove on your property. Definitely a good spot for that. And they get quite big. They can get like 4 feet wide. They're awesome. And then the maidenhair ferns. Now these ones are going to need a lot of moisture. They typically are growing where water is running. So if you have, I don't know, some kind of lowland wet area that gets a really good shade, isn't going to be dried out. That's a good one. Or like a water feature. They'll look great in one of those. So yeah.
Are any of them particularly good for containers?
So the deer fern does pretty well in containers. Polystichum, the sword fern, it can, but I think it does much better in the ground. They just might be stunted, if they're in a container. But
So the top
yeah.
one is which one?
That's the western sword fern.
Okay, and the bottom half is the deer.
Is the bottom left is the maidenhair. They have that weird like spiral
They're
right
almost
there.
flat.
Yep, and then the deer fern is right there. It's that picture is of it like kind of intermixed with a vine maple, I think.
Oh, okay.
In the wild. But yeah. Yep, and we do carry these quite often. I definitely wanted to show you guys natives that you could get and that are easily available.
How about dividing them? We do
Mhm.
have one of the one on the top.
Yes, yeah.
It's huge. And I keep thinking, like for the last 10 years, we should divide it
Mm-hmm.
or do something.
Yes.
Because it's just.
You can definitely cut into them and they'll usually section off. There's different rooting things. And if you clean the roots off pretty well, you'll be able to see it and you can just cut them and they'll be fine. They'll adapt to it. You just don't want to go through called like the apical meristem, and that's where they like send new shoots off from. So definitely try to get one that's on the outer edge, like a small clump, and then see if that takes, and it should be pretty good.
Question.
Yes.
Somebody on your Zoom asked and remind me of the same
Mm,
question
mhm.
about the things that require, let's say, moist.
Yes.
Trillium ferns,
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
How important it is to give them irrigation over the summer?
Good question. So like I was kind of saying, if you water them pretty deep, like in the summer, like once a week, or every 2 weeks or so, it should be fine, especially because when they're first establishing, they're not going to have their root system in the ground very well. They're going to need some irrigation. But once they're established, you can kind of play with it and see how long you can go. and a lot of them will be fine. It'd be one thing, but like if Trillium's in full sun, they're not gonna do it. But if it's under a tree that maybe, like you were saying, is dry, they will likely adapt because they are used to that. They'll encroach under dry areas like the Douglas fir. Their canopies will prevent moisture from going down. So, but yeah.
Did
Just
you transplant well? Like I have one
Yeah.
now that is now in a sense.
They can, but they are pretty finicky. Like but they have bulbs, so we typically will dig them up fall, I believe, is when they do that, late summer. And then like once they're died back fully, and then you can transplant. That's the best time when they're kind of dormant.
They still are kind of finicky.
They can be, yeah, but definitely do when they're dormant, not now when they're kind of getting ready to burst out. But yeah. Yeah, they're a nice one. They're also a bulb. Oh. Camille has a question. Give me one sec. Oh, good question. So, for the first month, she asked how much summer irrigation do Western and deer ferns require to be established or maintained? It really depends on how much shade they're receiving, what that site looks like in the winter. So, if it's uphill, not retaining a whole bunch of water, it's a really rocky soil, you might need to irrigate, but most of the time, once they're established, which is usually within a few months to just a month, they're good and you don't need it. And they'll adapt to it and they'll retain the water they need. I hope that answered your question. And all right, so we're getting to the tail end of everything. So working with native plants in your garden. Really, you just want to kind of, if you're really interested in one, look it up, see where it grows in the forest, and kind of visualize that, and just figure out a spot in your yard that you think would work really well. And then you can also group them, you can interdisperse them with different ornamentals, or you can have your own specific section that's just natives. There's a lot of things you can do with natives to beautify your yard, and they're pretty versatile. That's what's nice about them. Is like, I know I have made it seem like, they need specific shade and moisture, but a lot of them are adapted to our area and they tend to be pretty easy to establish and replicate around here. But yeah. Let's see. Okay, so some challenges that are involved. Some are typically quite hard to find in nurseries. So if you're really into native plants, you might be interested in one specific variety. It really is iffy if they're going to be cultivating one specific variety over the other. Like I was saying, some don't take very well to being planted in a container. Some, take a while to seed, like you were saying with the milkweed. And thus they just don't make much economic sense for many nurseries, sadly. And you also have to keep in mind that we have a few native or invasive species, so those can encroach and outcompete. So you kind of have to watch out when you're establishing native areas and keep them free of competition if you want them to thrive the best. But yeah, any questions? Okay.
So I have 100-year-old walnut tree,
Mm.
and then it's encased in a blackberry patch. And then I build a tunnel into it and filled it with lights and like made this cool spot that's like the deepest, darkest shade. Is there too much shade?
It depends. Does it get like any? If it gets like reflected light from the ground and stuff, like if there's still light penetrating into the. And also, I worry with blackberries that there's so much root competition that if you were to plant. Oh, okay, yeah. So I think like, you could definitely do some shade tolerant ones like Mahonia or Trillium in a container, but containers are a bit iffy because they tend to dry out so quickly. So if you did amend it with some native soil like clay, that could work. So we could do Bleeding Heart in there. They're pretty good in containers and it keeps them contained. That's cool though. That's a cool little arbor. But yeah, I think stuff could definitely grow though. Light is, there's no, I doubt it's cutting off like all of your light, but I don't know. I'd have to see it. Um, let's see here. Oh, which of the checker mellow did I say is native to Corvallis? So all of them are technically native to our region, but Nelson's checker mellow is the threatened one, and that one is typically it occurs very close on the outskirts of Corvallis. No, I think because it's not really retail, it's more restoration, and I think there's worry with cultivating it that people will plant it in the wrong space, and I think it's not easy to get seed for them because they are so finicky. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool. They do, yeah, they're not very good in containers, so I think just it's hard to get availability for seeds, and it also, you want to maintain genetic diversity, so you don't want to take it from like one patch and then clone those or anything, or just have that one specific variety. So I think the scientists are definitely like, or ecologists are working that out for sure. But yeah, they are quite important, and it's really fascinating. You guys should, if you're interested, there's a few articles on the Charcamellos that you could check out. It's really cool. Okay, almost done. Let's see here. Yeah, so to kind of round us out, native plants are important, and I hope that I've kind of helped you guys see that more, and also just the community that we can build around native plants. You can support local economies, because we grow them here. There are our product, and it's really cool that they can, go back into our communities, and both monetary and aesthetic ecosystem services are provided by doing that. We can help restore local ecosystems and just educate others about our environment and local species. And I have a slide at the very end. These are just some of my favorites that I didn't talk about, because we don't really get them all the time. We do have a bunch of fawn lilies, which is cool, and that's one over there next to you. And they're emerging now. They're the drooping ones. They're really pretty. Those are more of a shade understory plant. Tolmie's cat ear. Have you guys seen that before? Yeah, those are one of my favorites. They literally look like a fuzzy cat ear, and they grow in like full sun grassland areas, and they are bulb. We do get them sometimes, but the retail availability is not too common. Western columbine, very common around here. It's the red one you see, like if you're going up towards Mary's Peak, they grow a lot up there, on the slopes. Pacific madrone, we have one in the native garden in the back if you guys want to check those out. We do have some. It's called Arbutus menziesii. Those are gorgeous, and they are long-lived, and they can get pretty big, and their fruit is edible to many species. And then I also love Suhatsuga, Western hemlock. Those guys can get really big, so that's good to keep in mind, but they're a good habitat tree for many species, and their cones are used as food often on many birds. But yeah, they're lovely. And these are my sources for the images. That's about it. The Western, that one, I believe, I have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's usually like around, I think 4 to 6 feet a year. So it can be pretty quick, depending on the site it's in. Especially because I think when they're saplings, they are accelerated in their growth to reach the light. But once they kind of reach a good spot, they slow down in their growth a little bit. But yeah, they can get, I think it's upwards of like 70 feet tall, something crazy like that, depending on the site they're at. But yeah, so any questions, I'm free to ask, and I'll be around the nursery, and anyone else will be here to ask questions. And then I have coupons for you guys. So you can get these up here. It's just 10% off, and it's only valid for today. And people on Zoom, I thought about this. If you guys want to come in today, I also can give you the coupons as well. So yeah, Thank you guys so much. It was lovely meeting you. Oh, yeah.
Gonna be available on YouTube?
Yes. Yes. So I don't know when Rachel will get it up on the channel, but it should be within the week. So yeah.
On
And-
those arts channel again?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. And
Or all classes?
yeah, yeah. Even the previous years of this class are on there that Darren taught. So yeah. Thank you guys. And if there's any more questions from you,